speak in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. This morning in our readings we have heard two great miracle stories. In the first, from 2 Kings chapter 4, that Hilary read for us, where Elisha feeds the whole company, and in John 6, that I've just read, where Jesus feeds the 5,000. In both cases, we find that people are in need, help is at hand, the disciples are in doubt, and God is in control. The people are in need. So in 2 Kings we heard we were with Elisha, the great prophet who stands in the line of Elijah. The people are hungry and gathered in great numbers. The scriptures read 100. But to translate the Hebrew, that could equally mean a great company. In John's Gospel, we're in more familiar territory, of course, surrounded by the great throng who have listened to Jesus' teaching. Many have walked for miles, and they are hungry. Here the numbers are great. We are told there are about 5,000 in all. In other Gospels, we're actually told there were 5,000 men and also women and children, so the number could be huge. Today, we live amongst people in need. After a very weary 18 months of coping with heartbreaking loss, with enforced isolation and lifestyle restrictions because of the coronavirus pandemic, we are too, just like Jesus and Elisha, surrounded by a great crowd. And our great crowd are in greater need than ever before. The people are in need, but help is at hand. So in 2 Kings we were introduced to a traveller from Baal Shalisha who brings with him 20 barley loaves and fresh ears of grain. Barley was the first grain of the season, and the grain itself was often given as a first offering. But the other thing about barley you need to know is it makes absolutely awful bread. It is the poorest bread of all, and this would have been no feast for the soldiers. In John's Gospel, we meet our hero too. The boy with the pat lunch, or the bairn with the bait, as I was introduced to this story when we first went to Darlington. The bairn with the bait, 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. The day had gone on, and the boy reaches the moment where all around are hungry. Andrew, the disciple, is looking around to see who's in the crowd, and he finds a boy with a pat lunch, a bairn with his bait. And as a father of a son, who might also be called Andrew, who likes his food, my question has always been, why didn't he eat it? Why, after all those hours trudging up the mountain, has our young man still got his pat lunch? Probably because the fish really would not have kept well in that heat, and the loaves were barley loaves. He still got it, because I think eating it might have been his last resort. It wasn't very nice. This was no feast either. We look at the need around us today, and we know that we have something to offer, although we don't sometimes worry that maybe what we have to offer is not much. But as individuals, we must come with what we have, just like the traveller from Baal Shalisha, just like the boy with the pat lunch. Perhaps we come with diminished numbers and resources, diminished finances, perhaps not the obvious answer to need to around us, but we must, like the traveller, like the bairn with his bait, come and bring the barley loaves of our resources to the needs of the crowds around us in our day. People are in need, help is at hand, but the disciples are in doubt. So in 2 Kings, the helper and disciple of Elisha, who from reading the rest of the book we know is called Gehazi, is clear. He's handed 20 barley loaves and some grain. How can I set this food before the people, says Gehazi. Surely it's an insult to put something so trifling in front of so many that are in so much need and so much hunger, to give them next to nothing. In John's Gospel we hear the same. The disciples are clear too. Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, comes and says, I have a boy and he's got 2 fish and 5 barley loaves. But what is this among so many? We can often be the same. Yes, we bring what we can, but then we look at the need, and we too, like Gehazi, like Andrew and the disciples, doubt. What can we really do in the face of today's problems? So, like Gehazi and Andrew and the disciples, we respond often by doing nothing. In the words of the disciples to Jesus, send them away. We look at the lack of church finances and the scarcity of those who could do the jobs like in the good old days. Instead of looking at what we've got now and what we have to offer now and where our treasure is now, too tempted to send them away. The people are in need, help is at hand, the disciples are in doubt, but God is in control. You see, both Elisha and Jesus respond the same way to those doubting disciples. Elisha who speaks to Gehazi and Jesus to his disciples gathered. And what they're fundamentally saying is begin to feed them with what you have. And you will find the resources will be provided. And why? Because God has chosen to feed the people through you. St. Paul knew this too. In 2 Corinthians chapter 9 we read, Now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for the food will also supply and increase your store of seed, enlarging the harvest of your righteousness. However tough the situation and however deep the need, I believe God is still in control and he will provide. And the situation is tough. And the need is great in our nation at the moment. Yes, we had Freedom Day on Monday. Yes, the cases are still rising. Yes, people have had their lives scarred over the last 18 months, and nothing will ever be the same again. And the church is here, and we are here as Christians, and it is our opportunity and our responsibility to respond. But we do so knowing that God is in control, and that he will provide. And he says to us too, begin to feed them with what you have, and you will find the resources will be provided. And why? Because God has chosen to feed the people through you. Today is no different from the days of Elisha or Jesus. People are in need, help is at hand, disciples are in doubt, and yet God is in control. Our only real limit is our willingness and our faith. As our message this morning is held together in those words we heard read by Margie from Ephesians, with which I don't just end, but I encourage you all. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we can ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. To him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus, throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen.